Hey, we are live, and I want to just jump right into this question that I often hear. Do we need conflict mediation? Ooh, it is such a tricky question because you very well might, but you also might need something else. And so that's what I want to talk about today because I will tell you that conflict mediation is not the only answer. It's not the only solution that you need. And oftentimes, it's not the magic fix. So everything that you thought you knew about conflict mediation and managing conflict is probably, I hate to say it, wrong, especially in the workplace. So that's what we're talking about today. Is conflict mediation a fix, a magic fix for what you need inside your organization when things pop off, or do you need something else? And my answer is after 17 years in business, helping organizations navigate their culture, it's something else. So let's dig right into it. I've prepared some thoughts that I think are pretty amazing from the vault of my consulting firm, Wilson and Associates. And I'm glad that you were able to join, whether you're watching live or you're watching on a replay. So I'm going to just jump right in because it's always these two things that I hear from clients. I always hear, well, do we need conflict mediation? Do we need, an intervention? Does somebody need to get fired? What is the strategy? And I will tell you, it's not as simple as that. So let me tell you what I often hear. Krista, do we need a conflict mediator? And what is the mediator? What will they do? We just don't know what to do, but we know that there's conflict and people don't feel great. So, first thing that I will say is, have you ever hired a conflict mediator? Do you know what that role is? I think sometimes we get caught up on the brand names of things and don't actually know what it is. So I will tell you from clients I've worked with over the last 15 years, this is their story. Tell me if this sounds familiar to you, if you've ever hired a conflict mediator. So maybe you called them in because there was a team tension. Two folks got into it. It was delaying productivity or project timelines. But for my client, a number of them, in fact, they brought in a mediator who came in and helped two people have a conversation together, and that's important. But they ended up in that same tension 2 months later. And maybe not just with the original two people, but maybe there's other two people. So sometimes I've had clients that have said that conflict is kind of like a virus. It proliferates in the organization. It maybe started with these two folks, and then they got it squashed, and then it moves to these other folks. And so the question becomes, if we're bringing in support and we're helping, these duos work through their stuff, why is more stuff coming up? And I'll tell you, it's not your fault. Most of us were sold on this idea that mediation equals results. We bring in a mediator, they'll have these two people talk it out, and then they'll fix it. You might have heard that with like a marriage counselor, right? People are having marital issues and they go talk to a mediator. But just that conversation and just those two people talking to each other doesn't eliminate the real issue that might be at the root. Because conflict, and when I say conflict, that's an umbrella. When there's disagreement, argument, disrespect, misunderstanding, all of that kind of incivility, when it shows up, it's showing up not because two people just can't have a conversation and they need to have a mediator facilitate them through it to get to the other side. That helps, but conflict and that kind of incivility, it's also structural, it's cultural, and it's systemic. So let me tell you a story. A division brought me in to mediate a conflict. There were two staff who were just butting heads, they were clashing. But when we got to the bottom of the issue, and I did help them have a conversation, I also did some behind the scenes mapping of the issues, potential activators and triggers. What we found out was that the conflict, the issue, wasn't just about those two people. It was about some other conditions happening in the organization, like low trust. There was no conflict norms. There was no agreements about how will we talk to each other, how will we treat each other, and how will we navigate through these tense situations where maybe there's high stakes or there's a lot of emotions in play, or there's just opposing viewpoints, and you start to have that us versus them mentality. We also saw that there was avoidance. So a heavy culture of conflict avoidance inside the organization, which meant the general, MO of the leadership was like, just kind of ignore it if it'll go away. And if it escalates and gets to be a really big problem, then we'll call in a mediator. But that is not a culture that facilitates understanding and connection and collaboration, nevertheless, psychological safety and trust. That's why I'm always saying to my clients, you need more. And I'm going to tell you what that need for more is. If you want some more resources and you stay to the end, I will offer you three things that I think are pretty incredible. I've got the conflict clarity kit. It's available both on my YouTube profile, but I'm going to drop a link in the toward the end of this live. Another great resource is our conflict resilience quiz. If you want to know what the state of conflict is on your team, you probably want to take this assessment. I think it's like 10 or 12 quick questions to understand what's the state of conflict, or what we call conflict resiliency in your team. And the last thing is, for folks who stay to the end of this video, I am offering free access to my pretty amazing e-course called Dismantle the Zones. Because what we also see when we come in and we support clients around conflict is that a lot of times there might be culture clashes or misunderstandings because we all have a different culture. And that shapes how we show up, how we talk, how we interact, and how we see things. So Dismantle the Zones e-course is a great way to build your inclusive leadership and communication skills. And if you stay to the end, I'm going to give you a free code. Yes, free code, so that you can have that course for free. All right. So digging into conflict mediation, let me tell you just in short how I would see it. Mediation is about being reactive, right? Something happens. There was a disrespect, there was rudeness, there was a fight, and I mean verbal, not like this fight, although I have had clients where hands were thrown, true story. Mediation is about being reactive. So something happened, we bring someone in, right? But having a reactive stance to conflict is not the best way to create a culture where conflict and incivility doesn't take root. If you don't want it to take root, you need more than just reacting when stuff happens. This is why in my company, we dub the term conflict resiliency. So conflict resiliency is a way of being and a way of being proactive in particular. It requires skills, it requires systems in your organization, and it requires strategy. So in my company, we call it, what we built is a conflict operating system, or conflict OS, right? And I'll tell you a little bit more about the conflict OS in a couple minutes, but I wanted to first preview, here's how we talk about conflict resiliency. Now, something else that I'll mention too is there is a lot of different skills underneath this. So you may have heard the term emotional intelligence. This is a lot of the training that my company does. We are helping people be aware of their emotional triggers, how they're showing up emotionally, how to manage those emotions, and how to manage and navigate the emotions of others. So emotional intelligence is huge when it comes to conflict resiliency. Now, I'll tell you another thing that's really, really big when it comes to this world of conflict. Someone dubbed, and it was actually on the cover of Harvard Business Review this quarter, was conflict intelligence. So this is having a heightened sense of intelligence to help you navigate conflict and incivility. But also inside of that intelligence, you can't have that without emotional intelligence. So that's the human side of conflict resiliency, where you might have a mediator or you might have training, but there's so much more to building an organization. Like real fix for conflict is building it into the DNA of the company. So let me tell you that that's not what the current state of our organizations are. It's just not. We've heard, and we just saw the stat in this Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, that basically employees do not believe that their managers have the skills, abilities, or knowledge to manage conflict. So 1 in 3 employees say that their company handles conflict poorly. So a third, if you get 12 people in a room, maybe that's the size of your team, not going to be math on the spot. 4 people in that room believe that you as a leader and the company itself cannot manage an incident if of disrespect or rude comments of conflict when and if it emerges. And then here's the impact of that. Same study from the Society of Human Resource Management. Every time we experience a moment of disrespect, of rudeness, of disagreements that feel like they just have gotten so hot, and even full blown conflict, when we experience one of those incidents, and by the way, on average, we're experiencing 3 to 5 a week and more if you're a person of color, you have a marginalized gender identity, if you are a woman, disabled, and other marginalized identity, that's going to be higher. You're going to have higher instances of incivility, rude comments, disrespect, and conflict. But every incident that we experience, we're losing about 40 minutes. And you probably know this is true. This just happened to me last week. Someone said something very disrespectful to me, didn't honor my boundaries, didn't give me respect or care. And for 40 minutes or so, 30, maybe 30, I couldn't focus. I was like, I gotta talk this out. I have to clear my head. What am I gonna say? What am I gonna do? Am I gonna address it with them? I didn't know what to do because it was so overwhelming and so shocking that it happened to me. That's what happens to most of us. And so when you calculate that, 3 instances a week, 40 minutes of, recovery time for each instance, it's about almost 2 days a month of productivity that we are losing every month because this stuff is not getting managed. That's deep. Even for myself, when I was like, I don't know what to say, we have an AI powered conflict coach called Ask Cord. So I went to Ask Cord. I literally was like, this happened to me. These are the dynamics. Here's who was involved. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I have 3 options in my mind, but what do you recommend? And then Ask Cord gave me some pretty stellar advice. And we built this coach, this AI powered conflict coach, based on my company's conflict resiliency methodology. And so really proud of that resource, but just trying to spread these skills and knowledge because we know what it's like. I know what it's like to be reeling after someone has harmed you, essentially. So here's a question. If we've got, say, these stats, so 1 in 3 people don't believe that their companies can manage conflict well, and we're losing 2 days a month of productivity. Like, how, for real, how is that possible when inside of most organizations, they've got these 3 things? We've got human resources, we've got supervisors who are that standalone support and buffer before HR. We've got codes of conduct and employee handbooks. And we have full-on HR departments with leaders and tools and tactics that they've been trained on. So if we have at least this in place, and maybe other companies have other things, but if we have at least this, then how can it be that we see these stats that 1 in 3 folks are basically don't believe that their companies can intervene and make it right when conflict happens, and we're losing 2 days a month roughly in lost productivity? How can that be? The answer is because we are relying on reactive strategies. And that's why I say that conflict mediation is not a fix. It cannot be the only tool in your toolbox. You need to have more, or what we call a system, a conflict resiliency operating system. So here's what we know actually works. If you want a culture where conflict does not take root, where leaders and team members have the skills and systems and ability to get to the other side when these acts of incivility pop up, here's what you're going to need. You got to have conflict norms, agreements that is co-created by the team. Essentially, how are we going to treat each other? And if something like incivility or rudeness or disrespect shows up, what are we going to do about it? Not what's HR going to do about it, but what are we, as us as individuals, as us and our supervisor, what will we do? If it has to escalate to HR, great, but what are our norms to each other? What are our commitments to each other? This next one falls right along into it. Does your team have, and your company really have, clear escalation pathways? I've heard in my client organizations for years that people saw disrespect, they saw rude comments, they were in those heated disagreements that felt like it was about to go left, but they didn't know what they were empowered to do, right? I was with a client just a few months ago, and one of the incidents that occurred was in a meeting. There was some disrespectful comments and also belittling behavior. And half of the room saw what was happening, and they felt, as they told me, somebody should say something. This isn't who we are. Somebody should say something. But they didn't say something because they didn't know what to say. They didn't know if it was their responsibility. The manager was there leading the meeting. Is it the manager's job? Whose job is it? How do we escalate it? And then the people who were involved, both the person who was being disrespectful and the person who was disrespected, they didn't know. Should we address it in front of everybody? Do we try to handle it ourselves after the meeting? I have different comfort with engaging with this stuff. So everybody was in this place of being stuck and frozen, of not knowing what to do, but knowing something should be done. That's why you need clear escalation policies. That falls right along with this next one about bystander roles and the training. So for those of us who witness an incident and we want to say something, can we? Will the company support us if we got involved by trying to bring everybody back into alignment of our accountability practices and conflict norms, right? What is the expectation for people who witness this? And I'll tell you, a field and industry where this incivility runs high, it's customer service. My sister has been working in client relations and customer service for maybe 2 decades. And last year she told me a story where she was helping a customer on the phone. What the client wanted was not available. And then get this, the client started to cuss my sister out and called her the C word, like see you next Tuesday, C word. And luckily my sister has had training, and also she knows the company's not going to allow her to like cuss back out the customer, right? So she didn't. But what happened after that, right? How does the company also ensure that my sister is taken care of after that high value, or not high value, that high stakes, really ugly exchange? That's when we talk about leadership development. How are our leaders equipped to take care of their people through conflict and identify moments for repair that are required in situations where we've experienced a harm at work? Now, what we also know actually works is that for teams and for companies to have a dedicated conflict navigation system, a method, a practice. So at Wilson and Associates, we train our clients in the scale generative conflict method. That's our method that is about how do you get grounded? How do you expand the view of conversations that need to happen? How do you not assume the other person's the enemy and the devil, but that they maybe did a wrong, but they can also do a right? So, and how do you create solutions that are rooted in listening and care? So this is our scale method, but there's plenty of other methods too that I've been trained on, ways to understand conflict. So for example, crucial conversations is one, courageous conversations is another. But definitely you need a system that everybody is clear on and everybody's in that shared practice. So here is an action task for you. You can do a live audit, right? A little assessment to rate conflict resiliency in your team. So if you scan this QR code, it will take you to a very short conflict resiliency quiz. And you can, I think it's like 10 or 12 questions to understand the state of conflict and these elements inside of your organization. Okay, so go ahead and scan that QR code. It's totally free. I think it's great. It gives you some action items at the end too. If you don't do that, here are some things you can consider. So the first I would say is, do you have conflict norms in writing? Do you have a known conflict escalation policy? So if something were to happen today, do you know what the company expects you to do through that incident? The third I would say is asking this question whether or not it's you or people, but Do y'all feel equipped to repair a harm, to mediate or to address a conflict or rough disagreement when it shows up? Do you feel comfortable and confident? And do you have clarity about how you would do it? Most people we work with say they don't. And then the fourth, just quick little mini assessment I could offer you now is, do your managers know how to navigate tension, disrespect, conflict? Another great question. So all of this takes me to what on my company we call the conflict resiliency OS. This is the skills, it's the systems, it's the structures, it's the strategies, it's having psychological safety and trust in play, because without that, none of this works. All of that goes into the conflict operating system. So we're talking about, we've got our conflict norms activated. The team agreements, they are synced up. Everybody's on the same page. You have a functional escalation system. There's feedback loops, and they're online. I don't mean actually like on the internet. I mean they're running. We're playing with the tech metaphor here, y'all. But the loop systems, they're online. They're green to go. That's how you get what we call a repair culture that's enabled. So at Wilson and Associates, we have a framework that guides our culture change efforts. It's called the recipe for transformation. I used to be a chef, so I love a good food metaphor. The recipe for transformation essentially says if you want to build a culture that's great, where both the company, the culture, and the people are thriving, you got to do 3 main steps. And under each step are 3 subtasks. But the 3 main steps, you have to envision the future. What's the kind of place you're trying to build? And what and who is needed to get that dream to be manifested. The second step in recipe for transformation is discover. So you got to figure out, well, if we know what we want, what's been getting in the way? And not just superficial looking at the surface, you got to go deep. You got to look at the roots. What is up in here that is preventing our culture, our people from thriving, right? And you tend to the roots. You're going to cover some stuff too, but you're also going to learn what are the skills that folks need in order to achieve the dream and the vision that was just crafted for the company and the culture. And the third step for us is repair, because we know that harm happens in the workplace because it happens in society at large. And organizations are just microcosms of society at large. So in order to have that level of repair, you have to have systems in place, like the conflict resiliency OS. So if you want to build a culture where conflict does not take root, I want to offer you these 3 things. And you can scan the QR codes. And if you forget or come back, they're also linked in my YouTube profile. The first is this conflict clarity kit. Just a way to give a little bit of a snapshot about what is the cost of conflict that you're experiencing in your organization or that you've witnessed, and what are some things that you can begin to do to get better, at conflict. Another resource, I have it linked here, is we call that, a quick little diagnostic to understand, is your workplace conflict resistant, or is it letting incivility run free and rampant? So you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to that quick little quiz. And at the end of that diagnostic, I will tell you, you'll get some ideas, some strategies for next steps. And then the third thing, for staying to the end, y'all, I am offering you this course. It is called Dismantle the Zones. And it is essentially a way and a framework for you to understand lines of difference, which can be a catalyst for miscommunication, for disrespect, and even for conflict. So for staying to the end, for the next 30 days, this code is live. Just enter at checkout YT Live 3. And that will get you this course that we charge our clients for. It will get to you for free. All right. So look, I am so excited that we've had this conversation. We've been talking about conflict. We've been talking about all kinds of things like the conflict resiliency system. And I'll tell you, it is essential. You cannot have an organization where conflict doesn't take root if you don't have these tools in place. So make sure that you get the conflict clarity kit, make sure that you get that assessment, and you can share that link too, and make sure you get this course. My team is making some pretty amazing enhancements to this course. So it'll go live next week, but you can still use the code, get on the essentially the coming soon. And once we republish it, you will get that course for free. All right, that's my time. Thank y'all so much for coming and staying live. And let me just double check. I don't think we had any questions. No, we don't have any questions. All right. So with that, take care. Bye, y'all.